I've known about Michael Meade for 20 years probably, but only recently have I begun to really take an interest of what he has to say. I don't know why it took me so long, but I'm learning a lot. I'm watching a lot of his videos, and one of the things that he talks about is how children need a mentor. And I'm not sure I can identify someone who would have been that for me. There were elders, occasionally there were teachers who pointed out that I was good at something. I had art teachers in art school that would come to my house and look at paintings because they thought, even when I wasn't in school, that I had some talent. Um, but I have to admit, I stumbled around quite a bit in my 20s and 30s. It seemed like I, I had a hard time settling down and deciding what I was really made for. Um, I stayed within the paradigm of the arts. I was never going to be a mechanic. I was never going to be a businessman. I was never going to be um, a carpenter or um, a school teacher. I was actually more eccentric than I realized. And I had a certain amount of freedom to be eccentric. Um, my parents had six children, and they were pretty busy with everybody else and just surviving. And I was able to get away with a lot. Um, but in my 20s and 30s, I spent a lot of time just on the road. I went to California, LA, and San Francisco several times on 350cc Honda with my girlfriend on the back. I um, I went to Europe several times. Went through France and Italy and Spain and Greece, and I lived all over the place. I would always come back to Austin, but for a time I would be in New York, I'd be in Paris, I'd be in Florence, Italy, I would be in Venice, I would be in Los Angeles, um, and only in my 40s did I start to settle down. And I wanted to settle down in Austin, but I had a family member who made it difficult. And we ended up in a small village in the east of France, not far from the Swiss border. And I started painting um, seriously. And over 20 years that we were there, I created a body of work, and I actually got to be a pretty decent painter. Um, yes, I was writing. Yes, I was reading a lot. Yes, there was work on the house. I learned a lot of carpentry skills. Um, I worked out. I spent time outside. We had a garden. We planted some big trees, and it was a very healing way of life that creativity, that painting every day was something I would like to do again. That life fell apart again from a family member attacking my finances. And I was lost for a while. I basically didn't know what to do. I couldn't afford to paint. Um, and I ended up back in the States, and our kids tried to help, but it was the wrong thing in the wrong place. I did not want to live in Louisiana. I did not want to live in the States, really. So I finally just made a prison break for Mexico. And we're in Mexico now, and um, I have been writing. It's strange the way it happened because I started writing in the middle of the night just because I had all these sentences and phrases and paragraphs going through my mind, and they wouldn't stop until I wrote them down. So I'd get up and I start doing that, and then that turned into a book, and now I've published 6 books. Um, and I'm starting to think maybe I'm a writer. Um, but I feel very attached to painting, and I want to get back to it. I recently did painting that I'm proud of, and I had actually unconsciously started to think of myself as not being able to paint anymore, that I just didn't have what it took. And I remember a statement of, I think it was Van Gogh maybe, who said, the way to get rid of that worry that you're not a good artist is to practice it, is to do it. If you think you're not a good painter, then paint, and you will actually prove that that's not true. It's just, you're just fretting. And I did. I realize now that I started to think, well, if I can't even afford to paint, I must not be a painter. How that equates, I couldn't tell you. In any case, that painting is now on the wall in a prominent place here in Mexico, and it reminds me that I'm I still have the desire to paint. I still have the ability to paint. I can still think like a painter. I can still create something beautiful. For some reason, writing doesn't quite do that for me. I mean, I do need to write a piece every day I'm satisfied with, but I tend to forget what I wrote like 15 minutes after I put it down. I never forget my paintings. Um, they, I remember paintings I did 40, 50 years ago. Um, they just stick in my head. And even in my writing, I have to include visual images. For some reason, they really talk to something inside of me that nothing else can do. In any case, the mentoring issue, I basically I was mentored by a kind of process of negation where I kept trying things that were wrong, kept trying things that just didn't work, were not for me. And after I'd done a pretty extensive list of those things, I finally came to the right thing that was a definitive yes. And that made me a more solid person, I think. I think I grew a tremendous amount in that very short 20 years in France, where there was a closeness to nature, a creativity, a beautiful relationship with my wife, all my philosophical reading, all my writing, all of my meditation and working out with weights, all the carpentry work, everything just kind of, I don't think I could pick out one thing that said, and say that's what made it work. I think it was everything together. And it was complex, but it was healing. And I think um, I it probably is a really helpful thing for a young person to have an elder who can look into you and say you're really good at such and such. And because when you're young, you don't know. Um, so for me, it had to be stumbling around, trying things that didn't work, but being willing to just admit, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go in that direction. And by a process of elimination, I finally came down to what really works for me. And right now, painting is coming back into the picture. Uh, and when I think about that life in France, it took a long time to actually come together. The house that we moved into, that we bought, was a wreck, and um, it was extremely cold in the winter, and leaky windows, leaky doors, leaking roof, all kinds of problems. So we were definitely busy trying to just deal with that house. In rebuilding the house, we reconstructed ourselves in a way that maybe a mentor could help you do if they could really spot what you need and so on. But it looks to me like life gave me exactly what I needed, even the challenges. Anyway, that's my reflections for this evening.